The house is quiet. Only the ticking of an antique clock in the living room breaks the silence. That's all I need right now. Peace and quiet. At 67, you start to appreciate the simple things. Being able to sit in an armchair with a book, drink coffee on the porch, watch the birds in the garden, and not think about tomorrow's meetings or reports. 3 years ago, I retired after 42 years as an electrical engineer with the Palatine Municipal Utility Company. It's not the most glamorous profession, but it's stable and well paid. I started out as a simple technician and gradually worked my way up to chief power engineer for the Western District. My hands may be covered with calluses from working with wires and tools, but those same hands provided light to half the city and allowed my family to live with dignity. Odette understood the value of work. She wasn't afraid of work either, teaching math in high school for 35 years. We met when I came to fix the wiring in the teacher's lounge. She watched me as I fiddled with the wires, and then she started talking about a book I was reading at lunch, some popular science nonsense about the theory of relativity. A year later, we were married. We bought the house I live in now 20 years ago. Not right away, of course. First, there was a small apartment, then a small house in a working-class neighborhood where Errol was born and raised. And this house became our dream, and we worked toward it for a long time. We saved every penny, invested in utility stocks, denied ourselves many things. When we finally moved here, Odette cried with happiness. She deserved this house, this garden with roses that she planted herself. But she only got to live here for 8 years. Cancer took her 5 years ago. Now I'm alone in a 400 square meter house. Sometimes I think I hear Odette walking down the hall or clattering dishes in the kitchen. But it's just the creaking of old floorboards or tree branches scratching the window. I could sell the house and move to a smaller apartment, but every corner here reminds me of her. We chose the wallpaper together, argued about the color of the tiles in the bathroom, and planted trees in the garden. I'm not ready to leave all this behind. Besides, the house has gone up considerably in value. The neighborhood has become prestigious, and the land here is now worth a fortune. The real estate agent I recently called for an appraisal, just out of curiosity, said the house is now worth about $3 million. Not a bad investment, considering we paid only $800,000 for it at the time. Errol, our only son, never understood the value of this house, or the value of anything that is achieved through hard work for that matter. He was a late child. Odette was 38 when he was born. Maybe that's why we spoiled him so much. I tried to instill a work ethic in him, took him to work with me, tried to get him interested, but he always dismissed me. Dad, why should I mess with wires? That's last century. He wanted quick money and an easy life. After college, Errol got a job as an insurance appraiser. It was a good job, stable. But he always complained that he didn't have enough money, that his bosses didn't appreciate him. He always wanted more, but he wasn't willing to do anything to get it. When he turned 26, he married Prudence, a name that didn't suit her character at all. There was nothing prudent about Prudence, only calculation. I remember the first time I saw her at a family dinner when Errol brought her to meet us. She was a tall blonde with bright makeup and a piercing gaze. She talked a lot about her ambitions, about how working as an administrator at a dental clinic was just a temporary job and that she had big plans. Odette later said, I could see dollar signs in her eyes when she looked around our living room. My wife has always been perceptive when it comes to people. After the wedding, the newlyweds bought a house, small, but in a nice neighborhood. More accurately, we helped with the down payment. It was Odette's idea. Quentin, we have to help them get on their feet. I agreed, even though I already felt that this was the beginning of a slippery slope. When Odette fell ill, Errol and Prudence rarely visited us. They were too busy with their own lives. Errol called once a week to ask about his mother's health, but the conversation always turned to his problems at work or the latest repairs in their house. After Odette died, they came to the funeral, of course. Prudence even cried, probably the only time I ever saw her show genuine emotion. And then the visits began. At first they were infrequent, then more and more often, and always with the same goal: money. At first it was small amounts. Dad, can you lend me a couple thousand until payday? It's Prudence's birthday, and I want to get her a present. Or, Dad, our washing machine broke, and I don't get paid for another 2 weeks. I gave it to him, of course. He's my son, my flesh and blood. Although every time I reminded myself that at his age I was already supporting my family on my own, without help from my parents. Then the requests started to grow. Dad, we need 20,000 for a new roof. Dad, we want to change the car. Could you help with the down payment? Odette has been gone for 5 years, and in those years, I gave them more money than I spent on myself. The last visit was 2 weeks ago. Errol called and said that he and Prudence were coming over for dinner. We want to discuss something important. His voice sounded tense, but excited at the same time. I made lasagna, Odette's recipe, her favorite dish. Maybe it was a bad idea. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the past that evening. They arrived with a bottle of wine, cheap wine by the way. Prudence was wearing a new dress that clearly cost more than she could afford on her administrative salary. Errol looked nervous and avoided looking me in the eye. Over dinner, the conversation was trivial. The weather, some TV shows they had been watching. Prudence talked about a new dental clinic where she had been invited to work. More prestigious, as she emphasized. Errol drank glass after glass of wine. I waited for them to get to the important matter, but they kept beating around the bush. Finally, when I served the coffee, Prudence glanced at Errol and said, "Quentin, we wanted to talk to you about our future." "I'm listening," I replied, already guessing where this was going. "You see," she continued, putting her hand on Errol's shoulder, "we've been thinking a lot about how to move forward. Errol has an opportunity for a promotion, but to get it, he needs to make a certain impression." "What kind of impression?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "A successful person, Dad," Errol interjected. "It's important in my company. You have to show that you've already achieved a certain status." "And what does that require?" Prudence smiled her fake smile. "We thought we could move to a more prestigious neighborhood. There are some great houses in River Hills. It would really help Errol's career." "And how much do houses in River Hills cost?" I asked, even though I knew perfectly well the prices in that area for the wealthy. "Well, the one we have our eye on," Errol faltered. "About $1 million. I almost choked on my coffee. $1 million? And you want me to—" "It's an investment in the family's future, Quentin," Prudence interrupted. "When Errol gets promoted, his salary will double. We'll be able to pay the mortgage. But the down payment—" "How much?" Errol began. "How much?" and I asked bluntly. 200,000, he replied quietly, staring into his cup. $200,000. The amount Odette and I had saved for almost 10 years. And they wanted me to just hand it over to them to create the impression of a successful person. "Errol," I said after a pause, "do you remember how I started? As a technician at a power station, with a salary that was barely enough to pay the rent. But I worked, studied in the evenings, took extra shifts. I earned my success." "Times have changed, Dad," he replied. "It won't work that way now. You need to start up capital. Capital that you want to get from me, not earn yourself." "We're not asking for a gift," Prudence interjected. "We can make it a loan, with low interest." I looked at them both. At my son, whom I had raised with love, hoping to raise an honest and hardworking man, and at his wife, who seemed to see me as nothing more than a walking wallet. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "That's a lot of money." "Of course, Dad," Errol smiled stiffly. "We understand." But I could see in their eyes that they already considered the money theirs. They were already mentally furnishing their new home, welcoming guests, and boasting about their address in a prestigious neighborhood. That evening, they left early. I was left alone in the living room, staring at Odette's photo on the mantelpiece. "What would you have done, dear?" I asked the photo. But she remained silent, smiling her eternal smile. After their visit, I began to notice changes in Errol's behavior. He called more often, asked about my health, offered to help around the house. Once he even showed up unannounced with tools to fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen, even though I had already called a plumber for the next day. Prudence also changed her tactics. Now she would call to ask if I needed anything from the store or if I wanted them to pick me up for Sunday dinner. It was all so transparent that it made me sick. And then their demands grew. That's how this story began. But I'll tell you about that later. Now, looking at my garden through the porch window, I think about how Odette and I dreamed of a peaceful old age, of grandchildren playing under these trees. Instead, I got a greedy son and a calculating daughter-in-law who see me only as a source of money. I look at my hands that worked with electrical systems for 40 years, hands that built a home for my family. These hands are still strong, despite their age. And as it turns out, I still have use for them, but not in the way I ever imagined. It all started about a year ago, when the Brody family moved in next door to Errol and Prudence. I found out during one of my son's rare phone calls when instead of the usual, "How's it going, Dad?" he immediately started talking about the new neighbors. "You won't believe who bought the Mortensen house," he said, sounding strangely excited. "Silas Brody, the guy who owns the car dealership chain." The name didn't ring a bell, but from Errol's tone, I could tell this man was important to him. They had a housewarming party yesterday and invited the whole street. "Dad, their house is incredible. They completely remodeled the dump they bought. Now it has marble floors, a wine cellar, a home theater." Errol continued to list the interior details, and I listened and thought that in the last few years, he had never called with such enthusiasm, talking about work or anything really important. A week later, Prudence invited me over for Sunday lunch. This was unusual in itself. They usually came to my place if they wanted to ask me for something. I agreed, although I had a feeling that this was not going to be just a family meal. Their house, a two-story with a small, well-kept garden, looked different from how I remembered it. There was a new front door, obviously expensive. The facade had been freshly painted. Inside, there were changes, too. New furniture in the living room, a huge TV on the wall, designer knickknacks on the shelves. "Do you like our renovation, Dad?" Errol asked, noticing me looking around. "It looks expensive," I replied honestly. "We decided to update the interior a bit," Prudence said, escorting me to the dining room. "After we saw the Brody house, we realized how outdated everything looked." Over lunch, the conversation revolved almost entirely around the Brodys and other neighbors who, according to Prudence, live like people. I learned that Silas Brody had recently bought a new Mercedes for his wife, that they flew to Europe every month for the weekend, and that their children attended a prestigious private school. "Have you seen their backyard?" Prudence asked me, but she was looking at Errol. "A heated pool, a summer kitchen, a patio with a fireplace. It's paradise. And all thanks to a successful business," Errol added with a hint of envy in his voice. "Silas started out with one small car dealership, and now he has a whole chain across the state." "Impressive," I nodded. "But you know what else is impressive? Living within your means and not getting into debt just to keep up appearances." My words hung in the air. Prudence pretended not to hear and started talking about a charity event Brody's wife was hosting, to which she and Errol had also been invited. "Tickets are $500 a person," she said proudly. "All of Palatine's high society will be there." I almost choked. $1,000 for an evening among people they barely know? But I kept quiet. After all, it was their money, although something told me that it might soon become my problem. And so it happened. A month later, they came to my house together, unannounced. I was working in the garden, trimming the hedge, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. A new car, I should say, a shiny premium SUV. "Like it?" Errol asked as I approached the gate. "Leased it last week." "It looks expensive," I said again, not knowing what else to say. "Why do you need such a big car? There are only two of you." "Status, Dad," he replied, patting the hood. "In my line of work, it's important to look successful." We went into the house, and after the usual pleasantries, Prudence got down to business. "Quentin, we wanted to talk to you about our house." "What's wrong with it?" I asked, though I already had a pretty good idea. "It's too small," she sighed. "After visiting Brody and the other neighbors, it became clear that we need something more spacious, especially if we plan to have children," added Errol. It was the first time he had mentioned children. In 12 years of marriage, they had never seriously discussed offspring. "So what are you planning to do?" I asked, pouring the tea. "We found a great house in River Hills," Prudence said, her eyes lighting up. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office, a game room, a pool. "Sounds expensive," I said, repeating myself for the third time that day. "Well, it's an investment in the future," Errol shrugged. "Besides, real estate always goes up in value." "And how much does this investment cost?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. They exchanged glances, and Prudence blurted out, "1,400,000. I put down my cup. "And how do you plan to pay for it?" Another exchange of glances. "Actually, Dad," Errol began uncertainly, "we were hoping you could help us out, at least with the down payment." "Which is 300,000, he replied quietly. I looked at them both. A handsome couple in expensive clothes, with a new car, making plans for a house they clearly couldn't afford. Errol, I said calmly, you make about 80,000 a year. Prudence makes about 50. How do you plan to pay off a mortgage on a house that costs 1,400,000? I'm about to get a raise, he replied quickly. My salary will go up by at least 30%. Even if that's true, it's still an impossible burden. But Brody, I don't know this Brody, I interrupted. But from what you've told me, he built his business from the ground up. He earned his success. And you want to skip all the steps and go straight to the top. Times have changed, Dad. Errol stubbornly repeated his recent phrase. It doesn't work that way anymore. I sighed deeply. You know, when your mother and I bought this house, we were over 40. Before that, we lived modestly, saved, invested. We earned the right to this house. You always say that, Errol dismissed me irritably. Earned, deserved. But the world has changed. Nowadays, no one waits 20 years to live well. Borrow from the bank, I suggested. If you're as promising as you say, the bank will be happy to give you a loan. Prudence pursed her lips. We tried. They turned us down. They said our debt-to-income ratio was too high. Not surprising with their new car and credit cards, which I'm sure are maxed out. Then you need to rethink your ambitions. Find a cheaper house in a less prestigious neighborhood. But then it would be pointless, Prudence exclaimed. It's not just about the house. It's about what it gives us. Connections, status, opportunities. Opportunities are created through hard work, not bought with an address, I replied. We argued for another hour. I explained to them about financial responsibility, long-term planning, and that happiness doesn't come from square footage or marble floors. They nodded, pretending to understand. But I could see in their eyes that they weren't listening. They had already mentally moved into that house, already imagining how they would entertain guests, how they would casually mention their address in River Hills. In the end, I said I would think about it, but couldn't promise anything. They left dissatisfied, but they didn't abandon their plans. I could feel it. Over the next few months, their visits became more frequent. Each time they found a new reason to mention their dream house. You know, Dad, that house in River Hills is still for sale. The realtor said the owners are willing to drop the price to $1.35 million. We drove by River Hills yesterday. The air is so clean, so quiet. At the same time, their obsession with the Brody neighbors grew. Every conversation somehow came back to them. Did you know they bought a yacht? Prudence said during one of their visits. It's small, but still, they keep it on Crystal Lake. And their kids got into Princeton and Yale, Errol added, both on full scholarships. Brody says it would have been impossible without connections. They invited us to their Christmas party, Prudence boasted. Important people from the city will be there. It's a great opportunity for Errol's career. With each visit, I became more convinced that my son and daughter-in-law were living in a fantasy world where status and outward signs of success were more important than real achievements. They didn't understand that Brody, showy as he was, had built a business and created something real. All they wanted was a facade. One day in mid-October, Errol arrived alone. This was unusual. They usually showed up together as a united front. Dad, I need to talk to you seriously, he said, declining the offer of tea. We sat down in the living room. Errol looked nervous, fiddling with his shirt cuff. I lost my job, he finally blurted out. I wasn't surprised. With his obsession with status and a luxurious lifestyle he couldn't afford, it was no wonder that work took a back seat. What happened? I asked. Layoffs. They're closing our office and moving everything to headquarters. They offered me a transfer to another city, but we don't want to leave Palatine. I sighed. What are you planning to do? I have an option. The Brody firm, he hinted that he could get me a job as a manager at one of his car dealerships. That's good, I nodded. When do you start? Errol hesitated. There's a catch. Brody said that for this position, it's important to have a certain status. You understand, customers need to see a manager as a successful person they can trust. I already knew where he was going with this. And if we lived in River Hills in a nice house, that would really help. Brody even said he could arrange for us to meet some important clients at our house. So he's offering you the job only if you move to an expensive neighborhood? Not exactly, Errol shook his head. He's offering me the job anyway. But how I look to the clients is crucial to my success, and to his business too. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the boy who wanted to be an astronomer? Who could talk for hours about stars and planets? When did his dreams boil down to the facade of a wealthy life and someone else's approval? Errol, I began cautiously, are you sure you want to work at a car dealership? That's not what you've been doing for the last few years. What does it matter? He shrugged. The pay is better, and so are the prospects. Besides, it's a chance to get closer to Brody's circle. I shook my head. You know, your mom always said it's important to love what you do. She could have been a school principal. She was asked several times, but she refused. She said she loved teaching, seeing the students' eyes light up when they solved a difficult problem. Mom lived in a different time, Errol replied sharply. Things are different now. It's not what you do that matters. It's how others see you. I didn't argue. It was pointless. He saw the world through a distorted lens, and no words of mine could change his perception. So what about the house? He asked after a pause. You promised you'd think about it. And I am, I replied. But my answer hasn't changed. I can't give you $300,000 for the down payment. It's too much money. His face darkened. Dad, you don't understand. This is the chance of a lifetime. If I miss it, you'll find another one. I finished for him. Opportunities come and go. It's important to be ready for them, not just on the outside, but on the inside. He left disappointed, barely saying goodbye. A week later, Prudence called. Her voice sounded unusually soft, almost ingratiating. Quentin, Errol and I would like to invite you to dinner this Friday at the Azure Beach restaurant. It's our way of saying thank you for everything you do for us. I was surprised. They didn't usually splurge on restaurants, especially ones as expensive as the Azure Shore, one of the most prestigious in Palatine. What's the occasion? I asked. We just want to spend some time with you, she replied, and to discuss an important matter. That's what it is. An important matter again, but this time they decided to change tactics. Instead of coming to me with requests, they invited me to an expensive restaurant. Did they think the setting would somehow influence my decision? Okay, I agreed. Friday at 7. Perfect, Prudence exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. Errol will pick you up at 6:30. When I hung up, I had a strange feeling. Something had changed in their approach, in Prudence's tone. She sounded too confident, as if she already knew I would accept their offer, whatever it was. I walked over to the window and looked out at the garden that Odette and I had loved so much, at the roses she had planted with her own hands, at the bench under the old oak tree where we often sat in the evenings. What would you do, my dear? I asked the imaginary Odette again. But of course, there was no answer. I decided to go to the dinner. After all, it was just dinner. What could happen? But somewhere deep down, I felt that this evening would change everything. I didn't know how right I was. On Friday evening, the doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. Errol was punctual, which was unusual for him. I opened the door and saw my son in a new suit. Expensive, judging by the cut and fabric. He smiled nervously and held out his hand to shake mine, as if we were business partners rather than father and son. Are you ready, Dad? He asked, glancing at my outfit. I was wearing my only decent suit, the one I wore to Odette's funeral. I had rarely taken it out of the closet since then. There had been no occasion. Ready, I replied, taking my coat. What kind of restaurant is this Azure Coast? I've never heard of it. It's new, opened 6 months ago. Very fashionable, Errol said proudly, as if he had something to do with its opening. Brody recommended it. He's friends with the chef. Of course, Brody. Who else? We got into his new car. The interior smelled of leather and some expensive perfume. In the back seat, I noticed folders with Brody's car dealership logo. Are you working for him already? I asked, nodding toward the folders. Yeah, second week, Errol replied, pulling out onto the road. Just getting to know the ropes, but Silas is happy. He says I have potential. I'm happy for you, I said sincerely. Despite all our differences, I wanted my son to do well. Prudence is already at the restaurant, Errol said. She had a meeting on the other side of town, so she went straight there. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Errol turned on the radio, some modern music I didn't recognize. I looked out the window at evening Palatine, at the streets I had known all my life. The city was changing. New buildings were going up. Old ones were disappearing. Familiar places were changing, just like people. just like my son. Dad, Errol said suddenly without taking his eyes off the road, tonight is an important night. I want you to know that Prudence and I really appreciate everything you do for us. I turned to him, trying to figure out if he was being sincere. His profile was tense, a nerve twitching on his cheekbone. I've always wanted the best for you, Errol. You know that. I know, he nodded. It's just, sometimes we have different ideas about what the best means. The conversation broke off again. We pulled up to the restaurant, a new glass building in the city center. A uniformed doorman opened the car door, and Errol handed him the keys for parking. It all seemed too pretentious to me, but I said nothing. Inside, the restaurant was even more pretentious than the outside. Dim lighting, minimalist decor, waiters gliding between tables like shadows. The maitre d', a tall man with perfectly coiffed hair, greeted us at the entrance. "Good evening, Mr. Holdway. Your companion is already waiting for you." He led us across the room to a table by a panoramic window overlooking the city park. Prudence was sitting there, dressed in a black evening gown that seemed too formal for a casual dinner. She stood up when she saw us and kissed me on the cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume, too strong for my taste. "Quentin, I'm so glad you came," she said with a smile. "How was your trip?" "Nothing to report," I replied, sitting down at the table. The waiter appeared immediately, offering us the menu and wine list. Errol took charge of ordering the wine, choosing a bottle that, judging by the price on the menu, cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Is it a holiday today?" I asked when the waiter had left. "In a way," Prudence replied, looking meaningfully at Errol. We ordered food, dishes with French names I could barely pronounce. The prices were astronomical, but I decided not to comment. Let them spend their money as they wished, although something told me that the bill for this dinner, like so many other things, would end up being my problem. While we waited for our order, the conversation revolved around safe topics: the weather, local news, the recent renovation of the local library. Not a word about houses, money, or Brody. It was unsettling. They were clearly saving the main conversation for later. The appetizers arrived, tiny portions on huge plates. I had to restrain myself from asking where the rest of the food was. Errol and Prudence seemed to be in their element, discussing the subtle flavors and textures of the dishes. Finally, when the main course was served, Prudence put down her fork and looked at me. "Quentin," she began, "we didn't invite you here today for no reason. We have some important news." I looked up from my plate. Errol looked tense but determined. He took Prudence's hand. "Dad," he said, "Prudence and I have made a decision. We want to move to River Hills." "You've already mentioned this," I said. "Yes, but things have changed," Errol continued. "Silas has offered me the position of manager of his flagship car dealership. It's a huge responsibility and a lot of money." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That's good news." "But there's a condition," Prudence interjected. "Silas believes that it's important to have a certain image for this position. His clients are wealthy people, and they need to see the manager as their equal." I began to see where this was going. "And what exactly does that mean?" "We found the perfect house," Prudence said, her eyes lighting up. "Not the one we talked about before. Better. On a hill overlooking the lake. 5 bedrooms, a wine cellar, a heated pool, a home theater." "And how much does this perfect house cost?" I interrupted. They exchanged glances. Errol took a deep breath and blurted out, $2.5 million. I almost choked on my wine. $2.5 million, I asked, not believing my ears. "Are you crazy?" "Dad, it's an investment," Errol said quickly. "In 5 to 10 years, it'll be worth twice as much." "If you live that long without going bankrupt," I remarked, "how are you going to pay the mortgage? Even with your new salary, that's—" "We're not planning on taking out a mortgage," Prudence interrupted. "At least not a conventional one." I looked at them both. It was starting to dawn on me. "You want me to buy you a house? For $2.5 million? "Not exactly," Errol hastened to explain. "We were thinking of a different arrangement. You sell your house, it's worth about $3 million, as you said yourself. You buy a house in River Hills in your name, and we'll live there and gradually buy it from you." "And where will I live?" "With us, of course," Prudence exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. "There are 5 bedrooms, enough room for everyone. We'll be one big happy family." "One big happy family," I said sarcastically. "And my house, The house Odette and I spent our whole lives building? Just sell it? Dad, Errol lowered his voice. You live alone in a huge house. It's not practical. This way you'll be with your family. With us. With a family that sees me as nothing more than a walking wallet, I said bluntly. Prudence's face contorted with anger, but she quickly regained her composure. Quentin, you're being unfair. We care about you. We just want what's best for everyone. Best? I shook my head. You want me to give you everything I have. The house I built for my family, the money I've saved my whole life, and for what? So you can brag to your neighbors? It's not about bragging, Errol objected. It's about the future, about careers, about opportunities. Silas said, "To hell with Silas." I raised my voice and several patrons at nearby tables turned to look. I'm tired of hearing that name. Tired of my son measuring his life by someone else's standards. Dad, you don't understand. No, you don't understand, I interrupted. You're chasing a phantom. You think an expensive house and a car will make you happy? That your neighbors with yachts and mansions will be your real friends? You're wrong. It's not for you to judge what will make me happy, Errol snapped. You've spent your whole life fiddling with wires and switches. What do you know about real life? His words hit me harder than I expected. I looked at my son, my only child, and didn't recognize him. Where was the boy who used to sit with me on the porch, looking at the stars? Who asked 1,000 questions about the world? Who hugged me when I came home from work? Your mother would be disappointed, I said quietly. She raised you better than that. Errol turned pale. Prudence put her hand on his shoulder as if to hold him back. Don't you dare talk about Mom, he hissed through clenched teeth. Not you. Quentin, Prudence interjected, trying to defuse the situation. Let's get back to our conversation. We're offering you a mutually beneficial solution. You won't be alone. We'll take care of you. And when you have grandchildren... Grandchildren? I smiled bitterly. You couldn't decide to have children for 12 years, and now suddenly you're talking about grandchildren? How convenient. We always wanted children, Prudence objected. We were just waiting for the right moment. And that moment is now. When you need my money? We're tired of living in a cramped house, Prudence suddenly shouted, losing her composure. We're tired of counting every penny while others live life to the fullest. You're sitting on millions and we have to be content with crumbs. Several patrons were clearly interested in our conversation. The waiter hesitated a few steps away from our table. Prudence, keep it down, Errol hissed, looking around. No, I won't keep quiet, she was almost shouting. Buy us a new fancy house. You owe us that. We're your family. I slowly got up from the table. You're not my family, I said calmly. My family would never ask me to give up everything I have for the sake of appearances. Dad, sit down. Errol also stood up. You're making a scene. I'm not making a scene, I replied. I'm just leaving. I took out my wallet, pulled out a few bills, and put them on the table. This is for my share of dinner. You can pay for the rest yourselves. You're future millionaires after all. You're not leaving, Errol grabbed my arm. We're not done talking. I'm done, I said, pulling my hand away. Don't call me until you're ready to apologize and start acting like adults instead of spoiled children. I turned and headed for the exit. I heard Prudence shouting something after me, but I couldn't make out the words. The maitre d' looked anxiously at our scene, but politely opened the door for me. It was cold outside. I realized I had left my coat in the restaurant, but I didn't want to go back. I decided to catch a taxi. It wasn't that far to go, but I didn't feel like walking in the cold at my age. I hadn't taken 10 steps when I heard Errol's voice behind me. Dad, wait. I turned around. He was walking toward me, holding my coat. Prudence was following him, her face contorted with anger. You forgot your coat, Errol said, handing it to me. Thanks, I said, taking the coat, our eyes meeting. I saw something strange in his gaze. A mixture of anger, despair, and determination. Listen, Errol, let's talk tomorrow when everyone has calmed down. No, Prudence cut in, coming closer. We'll talk now. Let's go to your place. I don't want to continue this conversation today, I said firmly. I'll call a taxi. Don't be silly, Dad. Errol took me by the arm. We'll drive you home. We'll talk about everything. Calm down. I wanted to refuse, but something in his tone made me agree. Maybe it was the hope that he would change his mind after all, that my son would come back to me. We got into the car, Errol driving, Prudence next to him, me in the back seat. We were silent the whole way. The tension in the car was palpable. When we pulled up to my house, I felt a sense of relief. I wanted to get inside quickly, be alone, think about everything that had happened. How about some coffee? Errol suggested, turning off the engine. It's late, I replied. Another time. No, we have to decide everything today, insisted Prudence. It's important for us, Quentin. I sighed. Maybe it really was better to end this conversation now, to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. All right, I said, but not for long. We entered the house. I turned on the light in the living room, invited them to sit down, and went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. When I returned, Errol and Prudence were standing by the fireplace, quietly arguing about something. Everything okay? I asked. Yes, Dad. Errol turned around. Just discussing how best to explain our situation to you. I already understand, I said, sitting down in an armchair. You want me to give you everything I have. The house, the money, my future. For what? For a fantasy of a luxurious life you don't deserve. Don't deserve it? Prudence moved closer, her eyes narrowing. And you deserve it? What have you done? Fixed the wiring? Changed the light bulbs? And that's how you got this house? I've worked my whole life, I replied calmly. I built, I created, I provided. And all you do is demand and take. We're your family, she shouted. Family! You're 70 years old, you're alone. Who are you going to leave all this to if not us? I'm 67, I corrected her, and I haven't decided who I'm going to leave my property to yet. But I'm certainly not leaving it to people who only see me as a wallet. You're a pathetic old man, Prudence hissed. A lonely, unwanted old man. We're the only ones who still put up with you, and you push us away. Prudence, Errol warned, but she didn't listen to him. You think we need you? She continued. We need your money, your house. You can rot in a nursing home for all we care. Go away, I said quietly, feeling my insides clench with pain. Now. No, Errol approached me. Dad, listen. Prudence didn't mean it. She's just upset. We're all upset. That's exactly what I meant, Prudence shouted. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of pretending that I don't hate coming to this house, talking to him, listening to his lectures. She went to the bar, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, and poured herself a full glass. Prudence, stop it, Errol said. You're only making things worse. Worse? She laughed hysterically. How much worse? He's not going to give us any money anyway. He never thought about us, only about himself. I got up from the chair. I needed to get out, get some fresh air. I headed for the door leading to the second-floor balcony. Where are you going? Errol asked, following me. I need some air, I replied. Then I'll call you a taxi, and we'll finish this conversation. I opened the door to the balcony. The cold night air hit my face. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Prudence suddenly appeared beside me, her face contorted with rage. You'll never give us any money, will you? She hissed. You'll never help your only son. I've helped you for years, I replied wearily, but there's a limit to everything. Prudence, go away. Errol pushed her away from me. Dad, let's go back inside. It's cold out here. I nodded and turned toward the door. At that moment, I felt a strong push in my back. I lost my balance and grabbed the balcony railing, but it was slippery from the evening dew. I heard Errol scream, saw his frightened face, and then nothing. The fall was strangely slow. I saw the ground approaching, tree branches rushing by. Was I thinking about anything at that moment? I don't remember. All I remember is the feeling of betrayal, sharp and painful, like a knife in my heart. The impact was deafening. I fell onto a rose bed, the very ones Odette had planted. Sharp thorns dug into my body, but the pain was nothing compared to the pain of hitting the ground. I didn't lose consciousness right away. I lay there staring at the starry sky, hearing screams above me. Errol was shouting something at Prudence, and she was shouting back. Then I heard the front door slam and someone running toward me. Dad! Errol bent over me, his face white with horror. Oh my God, Dad, can you hear me? I wanted to answer, but I couldn't. My whole body refused to obey me. I'll call an ambulance, he said, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. Hang on, Dad, please hang on. I saw his face contorted with fear and guilt. I saw tears streaming down his cheeks. And for the first time in many years, I saw my little boy in him, not a stranger obsessed with money and status. "Prudence pushed you," he muttered as he waited for the ambulance to arrive. "I didn't mean to." I tried to stop her. "Oh God, Dad, I'm sorry." But was that the truth? Or was he trying to shift the blame? I didn't know. At that moment, it didn't matter. I could feel the life slowly draining out of me, the cold creeping into my heart. "The ambulance is on its way," Errol said, putting his phone away. "Hang in there, Dad. Everything will be okay." But I knew nothing would be okay. Not ever. Even if I survived, nothing would be the same. My son, or his wife, or both of them, had tried to kill me. For money, for a house, for the illusion of a life of luxury they didn't deserve. Prudence came out of the house and stopped a few steps away from me. Her face was cold and calculating. "We'll say he slipped," she said to Errol. "You understand?" He slipped and fell. No one saw. No one knows. "Shut up," Errol shouted. "Just shut up." I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see their faces anymore, hear their voices. I wanted to see Odette, her smile, her eyes. I wanted to go back to when we were happy, when our son was a child full of hopes and dreams, not a greedy stranger. I heard sirens in the distance. An ambulance was coming for me. Would they make it in time? Did I want them to? At that moment, lying on the ground among Odette's roses under the starry sky, I made a decision. If I survive, and I suddenly wanted to survive very much, everything would change. My relationship with my son, my will, my life, everything. They wanted me dead for money? Well, I'll teach them a lesson they'll never forget. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the thought that I would survive despite them. I would survive and make them pay for their betrayal, for destroying everything we had for the illusion of wealth and status. That night, as I fell from the balcony of my own home, I made a decision that changed everything. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was a white ceiling with a flickering fluorescent light. The first thing I heard was the monotonous beeping of medical equipment. A hospital, so I had survived. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through my entire body, from my neck to my toes. Something moved to my right, and I saw the face of a nurse, a young woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Holdway," she said, checking the IV. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fell off a balcony," I croaked, and she smiled slightly. "Well, that's exactly what happened. You're very lucky. Falling from that height could have ended much worse." "How bad is it?" I asked, trying to assess my condition. 4 broken ribs, your left arm, a cracked pelvis, numerous bruises and cuts, but no damage to your spine or internal organs, which is a miracle. You were saved by the rose bushes. They cushioned your fall. Odette's roses. They saved me. I almost smiled, imagining how she would react to that. "See, Quentin," she would have said, "I always told you these roses were special." "How long have I been here?" I asked, trying to get my bearings. 3 days. You were unconscious. The doctors put you in an induced coma to facilitate initial treatment. 3 days, so today is Monday. I wonder if Errol and Prudence came to visit me. They must have. They needed to create the appearance of a caring family. "Your son is here," the nurse added, as if reading my mind. "He comes every day and sits for hours. Would you like me to call him?" I wasn't ready for this, not now. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. "Not now," I replied. "I need to talk to the doctor first, and is there a phone here? I need to make a call." "Of course," she said, pointing to the bedside table. "If you need any help, just press the call button." She left, and I lay there staring at the ceiling. Memories of the fall, of the argument that preceded it, of Errol and Prudence's faces contorted with rage and greed, flooded back to me. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images. What should I do now? Call the police? Accuse my own son of attempted murder? Or his wife? Or both of them? I had no proof. It would be my word against theirs, and who knows what story they had already made up. No, I had to do something else. More cunning, more calculated. I needed a plan. Half an hour later, the doctor arrived. an elderly man with gray temples and tired eyes behind his glasses. Dr. Harris, he introduced himself. He examined me, gave me a more detailed account of my condition than the nurse had, and mentioned the expected recovery time. You will need extensive rehabilitation, Mr. Holdway, he said, making notes on his tablet. At least a month of bed rest, then physical therapy. Given your age, the process could take up to 6 months. 6 months, a long time. But maybe that was for the best. Time was on my side. Do you have anyone who can help you after your discharge? The doctor asked. You'll need constant care at first. My son, I replied, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. He and his wife will take care of me. Good, the doctor nodded. I'll talk to them about the necessary procedures and medications. When he left, I reached for the phone. I dialed the number I knew by heart, even though I hadn't called it in years. Raymond and Associates Law Firm, a woman's voice answered. Good afternoon. I need to speak to Terrence Raymond. This is Quentin Holdway. There was a pause, then, One moment, Mr. Holdway. I'll put him through. Terrence had been my lawyer for over 20 years. He had drawn up my and Odette's will and handled all the legal matters after her death. If anyone could help me now, it was him. Quentin, Terrence's voice sounded surprised and delighted. I haven't heard from you in ages. How are you, old man? Not very well, Terrence, I replied honestly. I'm in the hospital. I fell off the balcony of my house. My God, are you all right? I'll live, but I need your help, professional help. Of course, anything you need. I need to change my will, and there are other legal matters I'd like to discuss, in person. Terrence paused for a second, then said, I'll come tomorrow morning. Which hospital are you in? I gave him the name of the hospital and my room number, thanked him, and hung up. The first step was taken. In the evening, Errol entered the room, alone, without Prudence. He looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, unshaven. He stopped at the door, looking at me as if he had seen a ghost. Dad, his voice trembled, you're awake. As you can see, I replied dryly. He hesitantly came closer and sat down on a chair next to the bed. How are you feeling? Like a man who was pushed off a balcony. Errol paled even more. Dad, it was an accident. You slipped. Don't lie to me, I interrupted. Don't make yourself feel worse. He lowered his head, staring at his hands. It was Prudence, he whispered. She didn't mean to. She was just furious. We both were. But I didn't think she would. Where is she now? I asked, cutting off his excuses. She's at home. She's afraid to come here. She's afraid you'll call the police. I snorted. And you'll tell her I won't do that. Errol raised his head, his eyes a mixture of relief and disbelief. Really? On one condition, I continued. You'll both take care of me after I get out. The doctor said I'll need constant care, months of rehabilitation. Of course, Dad, Errol exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. We'll do everything, anything you need. I saw the calculation flash in his eyes. He thought this was his chance to take care of me, regain my trust, and then get what he and Prudence wanted so badly, my money, my house. Okay, I nodded. Then it's settled. I'll live with you until I'm better. With us? Errol looked puzzled. But your house is much bigger, more comfortable. My house has a balcony I've already been pushed off once, I replied coldly. I don't want to go back there. At least not yet. He got the hint and nodded. Of course, Dad. Whatever you say. We'll get a room ready for you. The best one. And one more thing, I added. Terrence Raymond, my lawyer, is coming to see me tomorrow. Errol's face tensed. Why? I need to update some documents, given the circumstances. What documents? His voice became wary. That's between me and my lawyer, I replied. But don't worry. If you and Prudence keep your word and take care of me properly, you'll have nothing to worry about. I saw hope flash in his eyes. He thought I was going to change the will in their favor, that taking care of me was their ticket to my fortune. We'll do everything we can, Dad, he said with feigned sincerity. You have no idea how sorry I am about what happened. I don't know what came over us. Greed, I interrupted him. Greed came over you, Errol, and it almost cost me my life. He lowered his eyes, unable to meet my gaze. I have to go, he said after an awkward pause. The doctor said not to tire you. I'll come by tomorrow. Is there anything I can bring you? Nothing. Just go. When the door closed behind him, I allowed myself to relax. The game had begun. And judging by Errol's reaction, he had taken the bait. The next morning, Terrence arrived, looking as fit and elegant as ever, despite the gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes. We hadn't seen each other in several years, but he hadn't changed much. "My God, Quentin," he said, looking me over. "You look like a man who survived a fall from a balcony." I grinned. I was going to say not bad considering the circumstances, but yes, that's true too. He sat down next to the bed and took a notebook and pen out of his briefcase. "So you want to change your will? What's the matter?" I told him everything. About Errol and Prudence's demands, about the argument in the restaurant, about how I was pushed off the balcony. Terrence listened without interrupting, only occasionally taking notes. "Did you report it to the police?" he asked when I finished. "No, and I don't intend to." "Why not?" "This is attempted murder, Quentin." "Because I have no proof. It'll be my word against theirs. And Errol is my son, no matter what. I don't want to see him in prison." Terrence shook his head. "You've always been too soft on him." "Maybe, but that's not the point right now. I want to change my will. Remove Errol and Prudence from the list of heirs entirely." "Who do you want to leave your estate to?" I thought about it. The question had been on my mind for the past day. I had no other relatives, no brothers, no sisters, no nephews or nieces. A charitable foundation, I finally decided, the one Odette supported, the fund that helps children with developmental disabilities. Terrence nodded as he wrote it down. "I'll prepare the documents. But are you sure you want to completely disinherit your son? It could be contested in court." "Not if I can prove that he tried to kill me for my inheritance." "But you just said you have no proof." I smiled. For the first time in days. "Not yet, but I will soon." And I laid out my plan for him. As I spoke, Terrence's eyebrows rose higher and higher. "That's risky," he said when I finished. "And to be honest, a little cruel. They pushed me off a balcony, Terrence. For money. They deserve to be taught a lesson." He sighed but didn't argue. "Well, I'll prepare all the necessary documents. But be careful, Quentin. They've already shown what they're capable of." "I'll be careful. And I'll have a secret weapon." "What's that?" I smiled even wider. "Their own greed." 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. Errol picked me up in his new car. Prudence wasn't there. "She's getting the house ready for your arrival," he explained. I spent the drive to their house in silence, pretending I was too weak to talk. Errol glanced at me worriedly from time to time, but didn't press me to talk. Their house greeted me with the smell of fresh baking and flowers in vases. Prudence stood in the doorway, a tight smile on her face and her arms crossed over her chest, as if to keep herself from running away. "Quentin," she nodded at me. "Welcome." "Hello, Prudence," I replied, leaning on my crutches. "Glad you didn't run away." Her smile faltered. "We've prepared the best room for you," she said, ignoring my comment. "It's on the ground floor, so you don't have to climb any stairs." They led me into a spacious room that was clearly their guest bedroom. New furniture, fresh linens, flowers on the nightstand. Everything looked perfect. Too staged. "The bathroom is right across the hall," Errol pointed out. "We installed grab bars in the shower, as the doctor recommended. And we bought a special shower chair," Prudence added. I nodded, looking around the room. "It looks comfortable." "We want you to be comfortable, Dad," Errol said with exaggerated concern in his voice. "What would you like for dinner?" "Prudence made your favorite lasagna." "Odette's recipe," she quickly added. "You mentioned it once." I almost laughed. Prudence, who had never been interested in Odette's recipes, had suddenly decided to cook them. How touching. "Sounds good," I replied. "But first I'd like to rest. The trip tired me out." "Of course, Dad." Errol helped me sit down on the bed. "Rest. We'll call you when dinner's ready." They left, closing the door behind them, and I leaned back against the pillows, allowing myself to smile. The fake concern, the feigned kindness. It was all so transparent. They thought they could fool me, an old man who had just been through a traumatic experience. They thought I couldn't see their true motives. But I could, and that was a key part of my plan. Over the next few days, I watched them, noting every fake smile, every feigned gesture of concern. Errol helped me with the exercises the physical therapist had prescribed. Prudence prepared healthy meals based on the nutritionist's advice. They both fussed over me, offering help even when I could manage on my own. And in the evenings, when they thought I was asleep, I could hear them whispering in the living room. "How long can this go on?" Prudence hissed. "I didn't sign up to be a nurse." "It's only a few months," Errol reassured her. "The doctor said he's recovering faster than expected." "What if he doesn't change his will? What if we're doing all this for nothing?" "He will change it. You saw how he looks at me. He forgave me. He wants to believe that I care about him." "And you do?" Pause. "Of course not. He ruined all our plans. Because of him, we lost our chance at the house in River Hills. Silas has already found another manager for his salon." "Then why all this? Why pretend?" "Because this is our last chance, Prudence. His house, his money, it's all we have left. If we don't get this, we'll be stuck in this hole forever." I lay in my bed listening to their conversation and smiled in the dark. Everything was going according to plan. They thought they were manipulating me, but in reality, I was manipulating them. A week after I moved in with them, I asked Errol to invite Terrence over. "Why?" Errol asked, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. "I want to make some changes to my will," I replied casually. "Given the circumstances." I saw his eyes light up with hope. "What changes?" "You'll see," I smiled mysteriously. "Invite him over tomorrow and have Prudence prepare something special for dinner. Terrence enjoys fine dining." Errol nearly ran to share the news with Prudence. I could hear their excited whispers from the kitchen and saw them embrace, celebrating their imagined victory. The next day, Terrence arrived right on time. He brought with him the new will, the one we had agreed on in the hospital, the one that deprived Errol of his entire inheritance in favor of a charitable foundation. But I told Errol and Prudence something else. "I've decided to leave the house to you," I said, sitting at the dinner table. "After everything that's happened, I've realized that life is too short for hard feelings. You're my family, and I want you to be taken care of." I saw them exchange glances, saw Prudence squeeze Errol's hand under the table. They thought they had won, that their plan had worked. "Dad, we don't know what to say," Errol muttered, trying to look touched. "Don't say anything," I smiled. "Just keep taking care of me, as well as you have been." After dinner, Terrence and I retired to my room to sign the papers. Errol and Prudence waited in the living room, glancing impatiently at the closed door. "Are you sure you're doing this?" Terrence asked when we were alone. "Absolutely," I replied, signing the will, the one that stripped them of everything. "What about the second part of the plan?" I smiled, pulling a small tape recorder from under my pillow. "I'm already working on it. Soon I'll have everything I need." When Terrence left, Errol and Prudence were on cloud nine. They hadn't seen the real will, but they were sure that the house and the money were now theirs. Their concern for me became even more demonstrative, even more intrusive. And I watched them, recorded their conversations when they thought I couldn't hear, gathered evidence of their true intentions. Slowly, methodically, day after day, my plan began to take shape. A plan for revenge for their betrayal, for their greed, for destroying our family for money and status. A plan that would teach them a lesson they would never forget. I lay in my bed, listening to them celebrate in the living room, thinking they had everything they wanted, and I smiled. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. And my dish was slowly but surely coming to a boil. I lived in Errol and Prudence's house for 3 months. 3 long months of pretense on both sides. They played the caring children, and I played the grateful and trusting father. Every day was a performance where everyone knew their role, but no one admitted it out loud. My physical condition was improving faster than the doctors had predicted. Broken bones were healing, bruises were fading, and wounds were closing. Within a month, I was able to walk with a cane instead of crutches, and within 2 months, I was able to take short walks in the yard. Errol and Prudence greeted each of my successes in rehabilitation with feigned enthusiasm and poorly concealed disappointment. I could see it in their eyes. The faster I recovered, the less time they had for their plan. And what was their plan? To take care of me until I died or became so weak that I couldn't change my mind about giving them the house. They believed that the will I had signed with Terrence made them the owners of my property. In fact, I had signed a completely different document, one that deprived them of everything. But they didn't know that. And I kept up their illusion, occasionally mentioning our house, how they would furnish it after my death, the money they would receive. I saw their eyes light up, how they glanced at each other, thinking I didn't notice. All this time, a small voice recorder hidden under my mattress recorded their conversations when they thought I was asleep, or when they went into another room and forgot to close the door. Modern technology allowed me to record for hours and then transfer the files to a flash drive that Terrence gave me. Errol and Prudence were careless. Too confident in their victory, they spoke openly, without restraint. 2 more months of this hell, and we'll be free, Prudence said late at night when they thought I was fast asleep. The doctor said that in 2 months he can be moved to a nursing home. Don't rush it, Errol replied. As long as he's here, under our control, we can be sure he won't change his will. Have you seen the way he looks at us sometimes? It's as if he knows everything. He doesn't know anything. He's an old man who wants to believe his son loves him. It's his weakness, and we're exploiting it. I listened to their conversation and smiled in the darkness. They thought I was weak, naive, sentimental. They didn't realize that I had long since figured out their game and was playing my own. By the end of the second month, I had a collection of recordings, dozens of hours of their conversations, full of contempt, greed, and plans for my property. They discussed how they would remodel the house, what furniture they would throw out, how they would brag to the neighbors. First, let's get rid of all these old photos and books, said Prudence. They take up too much space and look shabby. And let's pull up the roses, added Errol. I never understood why Mom needed so many thorny bushes. We'll put a pool or a barbecue area there. Odette's roses, the very ones that saved my life. I clenched my fists as I listened, but held back. It wasn't time for anger yet. In the third month, I began to take more action. I asked Errol to take me to my house. I want to pick up some personal things. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. He and Prudence were afraid I would change my mind and decide to go back home. My house greeted me with silence and the smell of an uninhabited place. Errol opened the windows while I slowly walked through the rooms, touching things, remembering. Every corner held memories of Odette, of our life together, of how happy we had been. What are you looking for, Dad? Errol asked, following close behind me. Photo albums, I replied, and Odette's box. Do you remember that carved wooden box? Vaguely, he shrugged. Where could it be? In our bedroom, in the closet. We went up to the second floor. I deliberately stopped at the door to the balcony, the very one from which I had been pushed. Errol tensed, his face turning pale. Let's not go out there, he said quickly. Bad memories. Yes, very bad, I agreed, looking him straight in the eye. Some things are impossible to forget, Errol, no matter how hard you try. He looked away first. In the bedroom, I found Odette's box, a carved wooden box where she kept her jewelry and letters. I opened it and rummaged through the contents until I found what I was looking for. An old envelope with photographs and addresses. What's that? Errol asked, peering over my shoulder. Contacts for old friends, I replied. I want to reconnect. At my age, you start to appreciate old friendships. He nodded, not thinking much of it. I didn't realize that I had just received the last piece of my plan. The envelope contained the addresses and phone numbers of all of Odette's and my friends and acquaintances, people we had known for years but lost touch with after her death. People who knew us as we really were, who remembered how happy we had been and how caring we had tried to be as parents to Errol. Back at Errol and Prudence's house, I began the final part of my plan. I started calling old friends, inviting them to a small gathering in 2 weeks. I want to celebrate my recovery, I told each of them, and my reunion with my son. He's taken such good care of me all these months. Most agreed to come. Many were surprised and delighted by my call. We thought you'd forgotten all about us, Quentin, they said. Never, I replied. It was just hard after Odette left, but now I realize how important it is to stick together. Errol and Prudence were confused when I told them about the upcoming gathering. Why are you doing this, Dad? You're not strong enough for that many guests. I want to celebrate my return to life, I replied, and show everyone what wonderful children I have, how you've taken care of me all these months. Errol and Prudence exchanged glances. I saw a mixture of suspicion and greed in their eyes. On the one hand, they didn't like the idea of filling the house with strangers. On the other hand, it was a chance to show themselves in a favorable light and reinforce the legend of their caring children. "Of course, Dad," Errol finally said, "if it will make you happy." "Very much," I smiled. "And let's have the meeting at my house. There's more room and it will be more comfortable for everyone." They liked this suggestion even less. They were afraid I would want to stay at my house. But they couldn't refuse. It would have looked suspicious. "As you say, Dad," Errol smiled tensely. "But you'll come back to us, won't you?" "Of course," I assured him. "I'm so happy with you. You're my family." He smiled, reassured, not noticing the irony in my voice. 2 days before the meeting, I asked Errol to take me to the house again, to prepare for the guests. He agreed, and we spent the whole day tidying up the house. Or rather, Errol worked while I gave instructions, periodically pretending to be tired and needing a rest. During these moments, I secretly checked my equipment, a small system I had set up in the living room with Terrence's help a few days earlier. Everything was ready. The day of the meeting arrived. Errol and Prudence brought me to the house 2 hours before the guests arrived. Prudence bustled about the kitchen preparing snacks. Errol was arranging chairs and glasses. They were both nervous, but for different reasons. They thought it would be just a party where they would play the roles of caring children. The guests began to arrive around 6 in the evening. Old friends, colleagues, neighbors, about 20 people, most of whom I hadn't seen in years. They hugged me, expressed their condolences for my fall, and rejoiced in my recovery. Errol and Prudence were flawless, smiling, helping with coats, offering drinks. Perfect hosts, perfect children. No one could have suspected what was hidden behind those smiles. When everyone had gathered, I tapped my fork on my glass to get their attention. "My friends," I began, "thank you for coming today. It means a lot to me. After Odette's death, I distanced myself from many of you, and that was a mistake. Now I realize how important it is to stick together." The guests nodded approvingly. Errol and Prudence stood nearby, smiling. "I didn't gather you here just to celebrate my recovery," I continued. "I also have an important announcement to make. After my fall from the balcony, I've been thinking a lot, and I've decided to make some serious changes in my life." Errol tensed. Prudence squeezed his hand. "First, I'm selling this house," I said, watching their faces change. "Too many memories, too many painful associations." "Dad," Errol began, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Second, I'm moving to another city, starting a new life." The guests whispered among themselves. Errol turned pale. "And third, I paused, looking directly at my son and daughter-in-law. "I want to tell you the truth about my downfall, and what happened after that." "Dad, you need to rest," Errol said quickly, trying to take my arm. "You're exhausted." "I'm fine," I said, pushing him away. "And I want everyone to know the truth." I turned to the TV in the corner of the living room and pressed a button on the remote. The screen came to life and a video appeared, footage from the surveillance camera I had installed in Errol and Prudence's house. In the video, they were sitting in the living room, discussing me, my condition, and my property. "2 more months of this hell, and we'll be free," Prudence said on the screen. "The doctor said that in 2 months he can be moved to a nursing home." The guests stared at the screen in shock. Errol and Prudence froze, their faces white as chalk. I switched to another recording. Their conversation about my house, about how they would get rid of Odette's roses, our photos, everything that was dear to us. Then came the most important recording, their confession of what had happened that night on the balcony. "I didn't want to kill him," Prudence said on the screen. "I just pushed him. But if he had died, it would have been easier. We would have gotten everything right away." "Shut up," Errol hissed. "Never talk about it. No one must know." I turned off the TV. The room was deathly silent. All eyes were on Errol and Prudence, who looked as if they had seen a ghost. "Dad, it's not what you think," Errol finally blurted out. We were upset, talking nonsense." "You pushed me off the balcony," I said calmly. "Because of money, because of the house, because of your insatiable greed." "That's not true," Prudence cried, but her voice trembled. "It was an accident." "An accident," I repeated. "And then you spent 3 months pretending to care about me, hoping to get my property." 3 months of lies and manipulation. The guests began to whisper, some shaking their heads in horror. My old friend Walter, a former police officer, stood up and walked over to Errol. "Those are serious accusations, son," he said, "and very much like attempted murder." "That's ridiculous." Errol began to look around for support. "Dad's just, he's an old, confused man. He made it all up." "Made up the records?" I asked. "Made up your own words? Made up how you planned to get rid of me as soon as you got what you wanted?" "You manipulated us," Prudence shouted. "You pretended to be weak and helpless. You made us care about you." "And that justifies attempted murder?" I asked quietly. She faltered, realizing she had just admitted to the crime in front of 20 witnesses. "I'll never take you to court," I said, looking at both of them. "You're my son and his wife, no matter what. But I want you to know that I've changed my will. You won't get a penny or an inch of my property. Everything will go to the charity that Odette supported." "You can't do that," Errol exclaimed. "We're your family." "Family doesn't push each other off balconies for money," I replied. "Family doesn't manipulate or lie. Blood ties don't make us family." I turned to the guests. "Thank you for coming. Now you know the truth. I'm not asking you to judge them. Their own consciences will do that. But I wanted you to know why I'm leaving, why I'm cutting all ties with the past." People began to stand up, some coming over to hug me, others casting contemptuous glances at Errol and Prudence, who stood rooted to the spot, transfixed by their own shame and horror. When the last guest had left, the three of us remained. Errol looked broken, Prudence angry and frightened at the same time. "You planned this all along," she said with hatred. "From the very beginning, you used us." "I merely gave you the rope with which you hanged yourselves," I replied. "You thought you were manipulating me, but in reality I was manipulating you. Your greed, your vanity, your desire to get what you didn't deserve." "What now?" Errol asked hoarsely. "You've destroyed us. Our reputation, our future. You destroyed everything yourself when you decided that money and status were more important than family, more important than love, more important than decency," I said. "I just showed the world your true colors." I picked up my cane and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Errol asked. "To a hotel. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a real estate agent about selling the house, and in a week I'm leaving for Santa Fe. I've always wanted to live somewhere warm." "We won't see each other again?" For the first time in a long time, there was genuine pain in his voice. I stopped at the door and turned around. "That depends on you. If you ever realize what you've done, if you sincerely repent, maybe we can start over. But I'm not going to wait for that moment. I don't have much time left, and I want to spend it in peace and quiet." "Dad," Errol began, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Goodbye, Errol. Goodbye, Prudence. I hope this lesson teaches you something." I walked out without looking back and got into the taxi waiting for me at the gate. As the car pulled away, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders, a burden of expectations, disappointments, and unfulfilled hopes. A week later, the house was sold to a young family with 2 children who looked at the rose garden with delight. "We'll keep them," the young woman told me. "They're beautiful." I smiled, imagining how happy Odette would have been to know that her roses would live on. Before leaving, I visited the cemetery where Odette was buried. I placed roses on her grave and talked to her for a long time, telling her about my plans, about the new life I was about to start. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked the gravestone, not expecting an answer. But a light breeze blew across the cemetery, ruffling my gray hair, and I took it as a sign of approval. There was no news from Errol and Prudence. I heard from mutual acquaintances that they had moved to another city, far away from gossip and judgmental glances, that their marriage was falling apart, that they were blaming each other for the failure of their plans, that Brody had severed all ties with them after learning about the scandal. It didn't make me happy or sad. I simply accepted it as a fact. They had made their choice, and now they had to live with the consequences. Santa Fe greeted me with sunshine and warmth. I bought a small house on the outskirts of town with a view of the mountains and the desert. I planted new roses, not as lush as Odette's, but beautiful nonetheless. Gradually, I made new friends, retirees like me, people with stories and experience, without pretensions or falsehoods. We played chess, discussed books, and sometimes went on excursions in the surrounding area. Every evening, I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the sun set over the mountains, and thought about my life, about the joys and sorrows, the gains and losses, about how sometimes the people closest to us can cause the most pain, and about how important it is to have the strength to keep going, no matter what. Sometimes I thought about Errol, the little boy Odette and I had loved so much, about his first steps, his first words, how he laughed when I tossed him up in the air. Somewhere along the way, we lost that boy. Or maybe he never existed. Just our illusion, our hopes and dreams projected onto a child who grew up to be a completely different person. One day, maybe I'll be able to forgive him. Not forget, but forgive. Accept him for who he is, with all his flaws and weaknesses. But that moment is still far away. For now, I enjoyed my freedom. Freedom from obligations, from disappointments, from toxic relationships that had poisoned my life for years. Freedom to live the way I wanted, without looking back at other people's expectations and demands. Every morning I woke up at sunrise, went out into the garden, touched the rosebuds and breathed in their fragrance. And every time I felt as if Odette was there, as if she approved of my choice, my path. We did everything we could, I said to her in my mind. Now it's time to live for yourself. And somewhere deep down, I knew she agreed, that she wanted to see me happy, free from bitterness and disappointment, that she would understand and support my decision to break toxic ties and start over. After all, wasn't that what she had taught me throughout our life together? To appreciate the present, not cling to the past, find joy in simple things, be honest with myself and others. I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the sunset, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace, content, free. Life went on, without Errol and Prudence, without their greed and deceit, without the constant disappointment of unfulfilled expectations. Just life, the way I wanted it to be. And that was enough.